This is World Now on TVC News. Thank you for joining us. Well, let's start off now with developments following the tariffs and counter-tariffs by the United States and China. In the latest move, China has raised import taxes for United States goods to 125%. President Xi Jinping is also asking the European Union to join China in opposing what's referred to as bullying from the U.S. We have more in this report.
China has raised import taxes on U.S. goods to 125% as the trade war with the U.S. over Donald Trump's global tariffs escalates. Beijing's State Council Tariff Commission, while announcing the retaliatory tariffs on Friday, argued that the U.S. imposition of abnormally high tariffs on China seriously violates international trade rules and basic economic laws. The Council also revealed that the new levy will take effect on Saturday. Recall that China and the U.S. have been engaged in a tit-for-tat tariff war, with U.S. President Donald Trump imposing more tariffs on Beijing earlier this week, even as he put a pause on tariffs for other nations after U.S. markets reacted negatively to the decision. Trump's universal tariffs on China now totals 145%. When he announced on Wednesday that China faced 125% tariffs, he did not include a 20% tariff on China tied to the role in fentanyl production. Meanwhile, China's Ministry of Commerce has announced it was filing a new lawsuit with the World Trade Organization, challenging U.S. tariffs, adding that the U.S. is to blame for the global economic turbulence unleashed by Trump. In the same vein, reactions have continued to trail the trade war and tariff increases. Analysts are saying the tariff increases between China and the U.S. are now becoming almost meaningless. That's because the levies on each other's imports are so high that they already impede much of the trade flowing between the two.
For more on the recent trade war development, impact entrepreneur and policy analyst Olalekan Oshinkoya joins me virtually from London. Good to have you join us, Mr. Oshinkoya. It's been a never-ending cycle of tariffs and counter-tariffs between the United States and China. What is the implication of this for global trade?
Thank you for having me. I think that the importance of this situation is to see that we are beginning to see across the world that it is important for governments to know that they cannot just, they need to do trade based on cooperation and not competition. And you have to respect the international treaties. You have to respect what is designed to help countries do trade appropriately. But it's put the whole world into chaos right now because all the stock market is responding to this in different ways, and it's showing that there's no uncertainty. And we cannot trade without certainty. We cannot trade without the confidence. The function of government is to provide stability to the people, to the government, and to the businesses that are doing trade. But when two great power are fighting each other and at war about simple things that they can agree on, that they can negotiate effectively through cooperation, but rather they are now it's now a question of one government or one president trying to bully another and the other responding. It doesn't just help the whole world. It's like two elephants are fighting and the whole world will suffer for it. At the end of the day, this problem is the consumers that will suffer ultimately from this trade war. And it's like you have rightly mentioned earlier in your report, it is meaningless, it is not necessary. It is totally, it makes the whole situation impossible. Like it just makes it that the purpose of global trade is to make that cooperation possible, but they can't achieve that now because it's not just meaningless.
So Mr. Oshinkoya, just to be clear, what do you consider the best way for countries to handle, this trade warfare, retaliation or negotiation?
No, it's not. Obviously, it's negotiation. There are global trade treaties that are bilateral treaties between government within nations. They've always done this, and that's the right way to always do it, is to cooperate, look at your specific circumstances as individual countries, and look at what is best for your citizens and for your government, and then negotiate using those things, not to just force other countries or other nations to change to the rule that benefits a one-sided no. It's supposed to be most of these trade treaties are negotiated over a protracted long period of time, and it's not just you just wake up one morning and you change the tariff system that has been in place for years to an extensive cooperative negotiation process. So it's always the most appropriate way is always to negotiate it. That is what is civil. That is what is diplomacy requires, that civil negotiation between two presidents, two government, two delegation, two experts, and they will continue to do that and look at the specific circumstances and use those information that they have to look for the best agreement, that best suits their own individual.
But Mr. Oshinkoya, yes, when President Trump, slammed these tariffs, there wasn't really a call for negotiation. It was more of, okay, so this is taking effect. So if any country likes, they can do whatever they desire to do. Wasn't that the approach?
Well, everybody, that's why the whole world is surprised, because nobody was expecting this. No, this is not the right way to do these things. The best way to do this is to negotiate it. But then there had been already existing tariff. These were not but just changing the tariffs should be. And I think it's okay to probably assume that President Trump's strategy was to use the tariff as an invitation to negotiation, which is what it was open for. But now that the Chinese government are retaliating, then it becomes a completely different, because it becomes a war. And in a war, you don't know how your opponent are going to respond to your tactics. So if you're playing a card and that card doesn't necessarily give you the outcome that you're looking for, you cannot, it's not like you are trying to force Chinese, assuming that your tactic will have a particular effect on them. But now your opponent, Chinese people are saying, no, we're going to counter and we give you reciprocal tariff as well that will affect your own economy as well. But it just becomes unnecessary. It will have been way more productive if there had been an invitation to have a negotiation to renegotiate it's always allowed to renegotiate these existing treaties or tariffs, and then look for ways to find a way to but not doing so, but bullying people into that is not,
Okay, so the strategy have an issue with that. Let's come to Africa. Is there a way that the continent, and more specifically Nigeria, can benefit from this face-off?
Absolutely. There's always an opportunity in every chaos. I think for Nigeria specifically, in as much as we don't really do a lot of process that we do do a lot of trade with China, but not as much, or with the rest of the world, we have a lot of things going on. But then it's just provide an opportunity to remind ourselves that you cannot, a change in government, a change in government in any country can affect the existing nature of business relationship that we have with other government, and that's why it's usually better to make sure that you cannot predict those outcomes, and then you will always look at the benefit of that to our countries. And I think it just reminded us that we're already doing a lot of things with other parts of the world, so you cannot put all your egg in one basket. So you have to keep your options open. You can't do trade only with one government, or do most of your trade with one particular government, because the change in government. So for Nigeria, I think this is particularly an opportunity for us to know that whatever we're doing with every trade partners in the world, we do a lot of things, a lot of trade with China already, and we're doing a lot with the US as well. But either way, we always have to be reminded that we have to open up our borders to other, but more importantly, to do a lot of things at home.
All right, so there is an existing trade imbalance between Nigeria and different countries. Talk about Nigeria and China, for instance. In 2024, China, which is a single country, actually exported about $178 billion worth of goods to Africa, the continent now. While the entire continent, consisting of more than 50 countries, could only boast of exporting goods worth about $116 billion. How do we change the narrative and achieve some level of equality?
I think that every Nigerian on the street knows that how important China is to Nigeria, because almost every finished product we buy is from China. Everything is made in China. And now it's no longer the practice that if you think something is made in China, it might not necessarily be something of good quality. But it's unfortunate. But we have to begin to do certain things ourselves. We have to begin to process our own minerals. We have to begin to improve our manufacturing, increase and make sure that there is every investment in setting up the right conditions that makes manufacturing possible, that makes a finish. Because the real money, the real benefit of trade is not in the way we are doing it. We're not processing, we're not manufacturing anything. We're just sending with raw materials and sending things abroad, and they're only for us to bring back the finished product, which is why there is so much imbalance, because we have so much potential with our resources, with our people, but we are underutilizing the potential that we have to actually use the resources and make sure that we make a thriving manufacturing sector. It's unfortunate that over the several decades, Nigeria manufacturing sector has kind of like plumbed down. Factories are closing. Bad government policy is not helping. Corruption is not helping. But then we have to have an intentional effort through transformational leadership to ensure that there is a deliberate effort to look at a long-term process that will bring back manufacturing jobs, that will bring back plants. I mean, part of what America is doing with this strategy of increasing tariffs on China and other part of the world is to bring back some of those manufacturing jobs that have been lost to other part of the country because of the reliance on imports for finished goods. And that's also to remind us that as Nigeria, we can never rely. And there's also security implication on us continuing to rely on foreign nations for finished goods, for food, because we cannot do this on our own. And if something goes wrong, this can be weaponized. So we must invest in our own capacity to produce some of those things locally and export it to other part of the world. And then we can make more money, then we can close up the gap in trade.
I hear you, Mr. Shinkoya. You know, still holding on to your comment about your thoughts that negotiations are the way to go and not necessarily retaliation. China wants the European Union to team up with it against the US. Do you see that happening? And just how effective do you think it could be?
I think that's exactly the direction that things are going. You can see that the Chinese government are very intentional in this effort, because again, this tariff is not only to China. So it will have been a different case if President Trump's tariff is only targeting China. Now it's targeting almost every nation in the world. So the European Union are also affected in a lot of ways. So it's very easy to see that collective effort together to fight this perceived bullying by the President of the United States, trying to force other countries to change what they didn't make. I mean, and it's like a backdoor way of winning. You know, it's like cheating in a way, but so that's not going to happen. So they will come together because they are both European Union and China are in the same boat, and the cooperation is necessary at this point. And if they all contribute, because ultimately the United States will lose out in the game, because you can't fight everybody. You can, I mean, US is a super power, but you cannot be on the at the same time you're fighting everybody under the same issue. The impact will be more on the citizens, and then you know how American work. We will respond to that, and they will respond to that, the disappointment, and then it will affect the politics. It's already affecting the country already, but over a long time. So I believe very strongly that the disposition right now from China and EU collaborating together is actually very possible, because they are trying to save their own economies as well, and they will need to do that, and collectively they need to fight this power.
All right, Mr. Shinkoya, thank you very much for your submissions on World Now. Entrepreneur and policy analyst Olalekan Shinkoya, thank you for your time on World Now.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll bring you